Greetings, everyone. This is Pursuit of Greatness, and tonight we have a very special show to share with everyone, and it's entitled Peace and Purpose. But prior to us coming on, we gave you a promo on the upcoming gala for ABIS, the Advancements of Blacks in Sports, is hosting a gala and professional development series, community service series, as well as we're honoring some of the great legends in the African American community in sports. So please go to We Are ABIS and log on and get your tickets for the event. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to I usually use words like amazing, but I'm going to shift that to serene, grounded, phenomenal panel of women who have transitioned professionally into a space that not only benefits them, but they are such caring individuals that they wanted to go beyond their professional demands and become very spiritually grounded and give back into our community this thing we call peace. Because if you have a purpose, you have a passion. But usually it's costing us so much to achieve our purpose that we don't have peace when we get to the top. And this is a show that is not centered around discussing our struggles from a negative space, but our challenges, which when you have a challenge, and that's what we're going to label life, it's a challenge. A challenge can be addressed, and it's a competitive thing that says, okay, I can meet this challenge. But a struggle implies that it comes from a very negative place and I'm just surviving. But these women have thrived in the spaces professionally and now have shifted. I think Karen Taylor Bass, I'm going to start with you because this is a phenomenal journey of a woman who had one of the top marketing and PR places and moved from that entertainment space into a space of serenity and still has the other space as well. But she did something phenomenal called reset. So we're going to call this, she and my next guest have reset their whole journey into a space of spiritual serenity. And aside from Karen Taylor Bass, that leads me into Shayla Edmonds. Oh my God. She started her own line. She opened her own company. She moved from a corporate job at Wake Forest into a space. She took that leap of faith. Both her and Karen Taylor Bass took a leap of faith and moved into a space that did not promise financial gains as the other one did. And they've trusted the journey. Thank you guys for being here. And with that, I'd like to introduce my dear friend, my sister girl too, which is Dr. Mari. And Dr. Mari has just she is one of the doctors of psychology who also has a very intuitive touch, not just a medical book touch, but she really feels the interior of the person and moves from the intuitiveness of her life. And Dr. Mari heads her department in psychology in Wake Forest. And not Wake Forest, I'm sorry, North Carolina. Wrong part of North Carolina, Shayla. My bad. But that's what this show is. We can make a mistake and correct ourselves. My last guest, but not the least of us, she's my new sister girl because we've both experienced near-death experiences and come out on the other side better than what we started our journey. Miss Tonia, who is the associate director.
Tanya. Associate Commissioner, Senior Associate Commissioner.
associate senior associate commissioner. I should have wrote that down on my paper, but I thought I had it in my head. I just got so excited. I told you I was going to get
That's
excited about
okay.
this one. So we all know Tanya is a phenomenal journey, and we're going to be sharing with you guys about how to grow within your space and find that peace. And through peace, there's love. And only through love can you find peace. So I love this show. I love all the people on it. We're going to start this a little bit differently in that I'm going to ask Miss Shayla, would you please lead us into this moment?
It's my honor. Thank you so much for having me, and good evening to everyone who's here. I'm going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes or just do whatever you need to do to sit in the stillness of this moment. And I'm going to offer a prayer or an invitation, if you will, calling on the divine in whatever way you experience the divine. I will say the source or God, the universe. We thank you for this time and space that is now. We thank you for every soul that is connected in this space, virtually and otherwise. And as we share our authentic selves and our truths and our stories, we ask that you would suspend our ego and anything that is coming up in us so that we could simply be vessels and conduits of change, of love, and of abundance. We give thanks for our host and for this sacred container and space that she has created. Ashe, amen.
Amen. Okay, let's jump in. Ladies, within this journey, in particularly, Black women have been taught and labeled as strong. When I hear that word, I hear what anthropology said about Black women when they were doing experiments on us during slavery, which is they can endure pain,
Mm,
they can survive under adverse circumstances. So it almost feels like it gives permission to people to not honor the spaces that we're in. And it gives us the feeling of we've got to be stronger and not show the authenticity of the pain that we've experienced. I'm going to start with you, Shayla, on this question. What would you say to people who say that? And what would you say to women in particular about this issue? And I also want to add that men are also taught not to show any emotions or vulnerability. But there used to be a time when only men led us spiritually and from a religious, I say from a spiritual point of view. So men are also labeled in general as you got to be strong, don't show emotion. And so we're now starting to experience a huge shift in that energy. So I'll turn it over to you now.
So first, I would say that I'm grateful for the shift that we're experiencing because I think it's important so that we can be well. But as you were describing or setting up the question, I immediately thought of a friend of mine, Dr. Shawn Ricks, a Black woman who's a licensed therapist who wrote a paper called Normalized Chaos. And in it, what she's talking about is how Black women in particular have been socialized into this trope of being the strong Black woman, so much so that there are things that we're encountering every day that might be normal but not okay.
Mm,
Normal but not okay.
I was going to ask you
Normal
that
but not
normal, but
okay.
not okay.
Yeah, because all kinds of stuff will happen to you and people will say that's normal, but it being normal does not make it okay. And so she talks about how normalize chaos in our lives so much through that socialization of being the strong Black woman, that we don't necessarily even recognize our trauma, or that being all over the place and being everyone's everything isn't actually okay. And so, what I would offer is that Black women are strong. That's a fact, but it's nuanced. we are strong, but we're also fragile. We are also figuring things out just like everyone else. We're also on a journey, and we need support. And I think that this default notion of us being strong is a bias and sometimes a scapegoat to actually seeing us
Mm.
and being accountable to creating the spaces that we're expected to create. Oftentimes, I talk with Black women who are frustrated that we create spaces and workplaces that we don't get to exist in. So people feel seen and supported around me, but I, in the same environment, don't have that lived experience. So we're strong, but we're fragile. And we're also figuring out that people can figure out their own stuff, that we don't have to be everyone's everything. And that, there's plenty of data that talks about the impact that it's having on our physical health, our mental health. We could go on and on and on about that, but I think that the tide is changing. And I'm so grateful to be in community with so many Black women, including those who are here, who are like, wait a minute, flag on the play, time out. This isn't working for me. And truth be told, it never did.
Miss Karen Taylor Bass. Are you on mute?
I am off mute.
Okay, there we go.
So the same question for me?
Absolutely. Your viewpoint on the shift. And I know that you're working in spaces with kids and you're really providing them with a serene moment in chaos.
Yeah, I'm so happy for the shift, First of all, I'm happy to be here and welcome everyone. I have to say that for me, when we talk about societal definition of strong and Black women, I had to be still with myself to really understand what does that mean to me and how do I show up in those spaces and what do I project? Am I part of that stereotype? Am I normalizing what strong is? Because when I was in the entertainment industry, oh my God, I was strong and perception is strong. You did everything. You wore many hats. You were that girl. You were that woman. But that doesn't serve you when you take a step back. So for me, I had to redefine what strong means for Karen. And when I redefined it for me, it meant something different. It meant being present tense. Present tense. It meant being okay with being uncomfortable. That's strong, right? We're not taught that, but that's strong. It meant not striving for perfection or balance because I won't get there. But what I can get to is I can get to harmony within. So on my journey and now in this wellness space and working with kids, I have to role model what I say, what I teach. And that's what strength is. Strength is being okay with advocating for yourself. Strength is okay with saying, you hurt me and you need to know why. I don't want to hold it in. That 10-year-old, 13-year-old who didn't get a chance to express it, I'm going to express it for her now because she's stronger. So I look at this as a journey, and at 56, I am no longer okay with someone defining, regardless of my ethnicity and my gender and my socioeconomic, what strong is. I get to tell you what strong is, and it's not verbal. I show up with it.
Wow. Miss Tanya, you have had a journey on you and you've had to explore and are in the process of discovering the essence of who you are in this journey called life. And from what I understand, you're rehousing your experiences, life experiences, and reevaluating your space and time. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Miss Tanya.
This,
I can't. Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, unbeknownst to me, you would ask me to be a part of this panel. And it's just so funny how God aligns things in his perfect timing, because this is a part of my healing space. On October the 24th, I was headed to Kansas City to receive an award. Excited, my husband and I headed to the airport. We missed our flight. In a small airport, Greensboro, we missed our flight. We set out to go the next morning. I went home, I grabbed my grandchildren, and we went to the swimming pool. We went to the Y. I worked out, as I always do. I work out in the pool. They swam, we got out. I wrapped the towel around me after taking a shower, and I had the worst headache that I'd ever experienced in my life. It's called a thunderclap headache. My 7-year-old granddaughter went to get help. That was on a Saturday, and I don't remember anything else until Tuesday. Long story short, I had suffered a double aneurysm. I don't look like what I've been through. My husband gets to the hospital. He was told she may not make it. If she does, she will likely be blind in her left eye. The aneurysms were next to my left optic nerve. She will be in the hospital for a minimum of 21 days. And it goes on and on. But during that time, I was shielded from all of the negativity. I never felt sick. All I heard were the positive words of the doctors. Your numbers look great. You're doing so good. I'm in ICU. I'm asking to go to the bathroom and take a shower. And they're like, okay. But I was in the hospital for 15 days. When they transitioned me out of ICU in 13 days, the first day I was in a regular room, the neurologist came in and I was up in the bathroom by myself. And he said, "Where is she?" He asked my husband, and he said, "She's in the bathroom." And he said, "Alone?" And he said, "Yes." I walked out. He said, "Are you ready to go home?" And I said, "I am." Not that I was pressuring them to go home, but I felt I was ready to go home. And he said, "Let me make sure that you're ready to go home." Next day he comes in, same thing, do a number of tests. I passed them all. He releases me in 15 days. And I'm on the phone, I'm texting, I'm on the computer, I'm asking my boss to come back to work, and everybody's like, slow down. And I continued on my merry way until it was actually my sister who said, "You don't know how to be quiet." And I said, "Maybe I want to be quiet. I'm fine. Maybe my quiet looks differently than your quiet." But it wasn't until I leaned in that I started to hear my body and hear myself. It wasn't until I took that moment for me to realize that I was in the midst of that working chaos that you spoke of, and decided to go on a track to be healed. All of us have trauma, each and every one of us. My siblings say that I live in the present. I do, very much so. But it wasn't until you started peeling back that onion and getting the help for me that I needed to realize how much trauma is there. And so just deciding to take care of me and prioritize me makes me show up differently. I'm still learning how to slow down. I will say that. And so I'm open to the pushback from my friends, from my family, because it's not easy once you've lived that life of being that busy Black woman, always on the go. That's defining your strength. But does it define your strength? I think I'm stronger for leaning into what's hard for me to fight. I think I'm stronger for my grandchildren.
Wait a minute. I need y'all to hear what she just said. She said she didn't run away from her struggles. She leaned into them. She didn't move away from her challenges. She leaned into them. And that is the essence of true strength.
Yeah. So if I break down on this call, like I spoke to the panelists earlier, I am in the midst of therapy, so I don't know what's going to come out, but it is genuine. Whatever comes out, it's just going to happen. So that's me.
That leads us to Dr. Mari, because Dr. Mari, we also are taught that there's something wrong with you. And I know this is an oxymoron, it's a crazy way to say it. If you seek counseling, if you seek help, we're taught keep your business to yourself. Now we'll gossip because that's contradictory to keep your business to yourself, but don't tell the family business. So we hide and we smother all of this pain. Where are you on this journey, considering that you see people all the time and you see and you feel and you hear their pain? What would you have to say to this audience?
Well, I go back to your original question about strength, right? And have we shifted? I don't think we shifted, we expanded, right? So the spectrum of strength is what we're really talking about. And for a long time, we could only be one type of strong as Black women. And now we're all types of strong. So I can be strong enough to say I'm hurt. I can be strong enough to say I have trauma, strong enough to actually face and lean in, as Tanya said, to whatever it is that we can handle. So strength is knowing I can handle whatever comes, right? Good, bad, or ugly. And so for me, as a clinician, I see this all the time, right? I see folks who figure out where their strength comes from, and really it is that vulnerability. The more vulnerable you can be, the stronger you are. And then from a personal, I lost a child when I was 24 years old. And for me, that was my worst day ever. So there's no day worse than that one. I've survived the worst days, right? So now I'm actually free to have bad days. I'm free to be okay when things don't go right. So for me, the strength came from this adversity that I had to figure out and navigate through. So, as a professional, I see strength on a spectrum, and Black women are finally allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and honest about what's actually happening. And then, personally, I've had my worst day. So every day is gravy.
You mentioned something, Dr. Mari, and I want to pose this question back to Miss Shayla. To me, you can't be at peace if you aren't present. Let's talk about being present.
Beginning with full disclosure, being present is something that has been a challenge for me. I am
That's what we want to hear.
constantly having to check in with where am I? I remember at the top of the year, I was talking with a good friend of mine, and the message that came through was, look at your feet. Where are you? And so I've throughout the year had to look down, where am I? So, so often when we're feeling a sense of shame, we're focusing on the past. There's something that I didn't do, something that happened, something that I'm grieving or feeling shame about. Or my favorite place to be is projecting myself into into the future. What's gonna happen? How is that gonna work out? Will it be enough? All those things that really hijack or steal the present from us, because in the present that's where our power is. But I think that for me, at least, between how I was socialized, the things I, observed growing up, there was a lot more conversation about the future than who are you today? So I'm more mindful of when people ask my children, who do you want to be or what do you want to be when you grow up? I think it's an interesting question, but I'm still asking myself that question. But I'm more curious about them understanding, who are you, what's your sense of who you are now? What's your sense of where you are now? What do you need? And I think that my father's passing was one of the pivotal moments in my life when I started to realize the importance of it. I was with him when he transitioned and didn't recognize how much of a trauma that was going to be until I was literally driving back to work after being out on leave. And I started to have a panic attack because the thought of people asking me how I was doing overwhelmed me, just the thought of it. And
Just the thought.
just the thought of it, the thought of knowing that I couldn't perform my answer and really having to ask myself, so what, okay, you know where you are, what do you need? And the answer was, I need to go back home because I'm not ready. And just that being in the present, not worried about, well, what are people going to think if I don't come back to work? What are they going to think if I'm, at work slinging snot, as as folks would say? What ifs, all of those things projecting me 20 minutes, 2 hours, 5 hours into the future. All that I had control over and power in was in the moment asking myself, where am I? I'm in the middle of a panic attack. What do I need? I need to go home.
Mm.
And just, I get so much spiritual guidance from Disney films. So, that Frozen line, what's your best next step? Like the best next step is close enough to the present that
Mm.
you will still be where you are as you're taking it. And so that's what it's meant for me. Like I said, it's something that I have to come back to throughout the day. As someone who's running 2 businesses, has 3 children, is married, and my husband is my business partner, there's always something for me to do or someone who's waiting on me to do something. And sometimes I just have to say, okay, where are you? Where are you in the present? And that might mean that, okay, you're in the kitchen, but you're on your computer when you came to the kitchen to make yourself lunch. Your next step was lunch, not that email. So I have to sometimes be very um, handle with care, i.e., like a kindergartner with myself around being present, because it's sort of like a child that you have to remind, okay, here are the next 3 things you need to do, but you feel like you have to constantly say, okay, what's next? I have to do that with myself
With myself.
oftentimes around being present. But I've learned to give myself grace around it because I think earlier on when I started to note it, I would judge myself. Oh, you're in that shame spiral. You're out in the future. Versus just saying, okay, Shayla, that's nice. Maybe that's something that you need to talk about in your next therapy session. Where are you now?
Mm.
May I piggyback off of that?
Yes, please. I was
Because,
just going to open the floor up for this present conversation.
Shayla, I'm listening to you and you speak of the trauma around losing your dad. And I too have trauma around losing my dad, but I'm just realizing it because I was so busy that was my way of suppressing. I'm learning that now, right? So everyone, friends, family, you need to slow down. You need to sit down. You do too much. You go too much. But unbeknownst to me, it was my way of sweeping not just that, but all of my emotion under the rug, under the rug. And you know how that manifests? As pain in my body, literally pain in my body. And so, I did not realize because my dad passed from in the COVID area, but he went into the hospital with gout, contracted COVID in the hospital, passed away when there was no visitation. So he contracted COVID after leaving the hospital, after we recommended him going into a physical therapy facility, and that ended up being his resting place. That's guilt that I've internalized, going back and replaying it. Was it the best thing to do? Absolutely. But he passed away. That's guilt that I'm carrying. But because I was going to this convention, being a part of this board, striving to be the best, always go, 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 never say no. It's just years and years of stuff that just builds up. And it just gets to a point where you can't take it anymore. And again, you have to lean in and find the help that you need. And that's the space I am now. And still unpacking.
Right.
But it's just amazing. You realize that immediately after your father passed. My dad passed almost 3 years ago. And I'm just starting to grieve after going through therapy.
Yeah.
But we do it when we're ready,
Mhm.
And so you're not late, you're right on time,
I
you
love
know. And I love what you said about, just acknowledging what you said about it showed up for you as pain, because I think that we forget or don't recognize the correlation between mind, body, and spirit,
Mm.
and how our body is keeping the score. So all of that
Mhm.
stress
Right.
we're storing
That
in our
is
body.
powerful.
It's got to find a way out.
And
You
there's,
know,
I'm sorry, there's a great book, Call Your Body Keeps the Score.
it is. I
Right?
love that
And
book.
that book it's like it, you really feel it. But I just want to piggyback on what you ladies are saying, because for me, in 2020, I honestly got the realization that I was in a life coma. Anybody been in a life coma? You
Mm.
walking around, you doing everything you need to do, you showing up, looking amazing or not looking amazing, but you're an autopilot. Your life is happening and you're not even living. And so in 2020, one day I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I'm in a coma. I am just going on with the get on, right? I knew my marriage was imploding, and we both knew that it was. But we were just in this movement. It was, before, pre-COVID or around COVID. And one day, what happens when you're in a life coma? Something pushes you to wake up. And for me, it was yoga. I discovered yoga like 20 years ago, just going different places. And I was just like, this feels good. And I said, when I find a Black yoga instructor, I am going to take the class, but I'm going to become certified. And so in 2020, I became certified, right? And talking about trauma, my trauma showed up in my ankles. They showed up in my wrist, and they showed up in my breath. So the body keeps score, right? So whenever you are moving and you think you're doing it, the tightness, the lack of mobility, you're like, oh my God, is that arthritis? Maybe it is, but maybe it's more. You don't know
Yes.
until the stillness. And so me getting on that mat, like you have to find out how you can come back alive. What is it that's going to spark that life for you? And for me, it was breath, it was movement, but it was being in my stuff. And just sometimes my stuff looked like me being in Sukhasana or downward dog, or or Shavasana, and just crying and giving myself that space to say, oh, you want to get up? No, I don't. No, I don't. I need to work through this.
That healing's on the other side. Amen. It is.
Yes, right? And so
Yes.
my thing too about the trauma and the triggers and the body is that mindset. Like we've been taught that we had to be perfect, we had to have it figured out, we had to have the best this. But then I look back at people who have that and I'm like, they don't look happy. They going through more stuff than I'm going through. So we have to, as women, I can only speak about women right now, redefine what this new life for you looks like. Because the life at 26 is not going to be the life at 36 or 46 or however old you are. But also, what are you holding on to? How can you clear space so that you can wake up from that coma and you can literally, have that sandwich and be like, dang, did it always taste this good? Was pesto on it last time? Because I didn't taste that. It's being aware again. And I think that's what mindfulness where I am now is just like, I'm waking up again. Like I was driving and I saw an owl. I saw an owl in the tree. And I was like, has he always been there? Like, I know that sounds crazy, but you ever wake up and look at your surrounding and realize like you've been on autopilot all this time and life has been passing you, but you thought you were living, but you really weren't. So we just got to take a step back and just say like, what do I need now? Forget about tomorrow. What do I need now to deal with where this journey that I am right now? Because the journey is different tomorrow. Just stay right here and give yourself that. That's the peace. and that will become your purpose.
Mm. Dr. Mari, oh gosh.
I mean, these ladies are absolutely fabulous. I mean, y'all are all baby therapists. I don't know if you know that already, but you are all licensed. I give you your license. You know, a few things. One is that women that come to see me, it's a certain demographic, and it's usually around an age, and it's usually when that last child is in middle school. So whatever age you are, when that last child goes to middle school, because the child no longer needs you, right? So you're now searching for what is next. What am I? It's that life coma that you've been in because you're doing this thing over and over again, and then finally something jars you and says, "What do I want? Who am I? Where am I? What am I supposed to be doing?" And life just got quiet enough. So Tanya, you talked about being busy, life being busy. So usually women, when life is busy, you don't deal with anything. It's until life gets quiet. So when you're talking about going to yoga and starting to move, part of the yoga was the silence that comes with yoga. You're with yourself, right? So whatever you're with starts coming up. You'll see women in yoga that start crying when they're in, you know, in child's pose and things like that, because they're opening up their body, and whatever's in there that's been held onto is being expelled, right? So pain is one of our indicators that something's not right. It makes us present. When you have a headache, you become present. Need pain, present. But what we don't do is look deeper into what is that pain really about. Generally, it's not about your knee hurting. It's not about your head hurting. It's about whatever caused the stress that caused the headache, if that makes sense. And so being present is so important. And it doesn't have to be this monumental task that you do. It literally could be 5 minutes a day. So I tell women, I tell people, get a timer, give yourself 5 minutes. That's it. Morning, at night, just turn that timer on. And for 5 minutes, just think, or just be, or just not be. But it's your time. And whatever comes up is what's important to you, right? Whatever rises to the surface is what you probably need to tend to. And it's just 5 minutes of your life. And so then you can graduate to, you know, an hour of yoga or, you know, 10 minutes of meditation. Just give yourself 5 minutes just to be still and figure out what's next.
There was a book by Viktor Frankl. I can't remember how to say his last name because Tanya already know I'm messing up names. That Frankl, exactly. And he talked about the Holocaust survivors, those that survived very horrific circumstances. The people that survived, he found, because he was a doctor of psychology at the time going through this, that people who had a purpose are the ones who survived. People who had a reason to get up in the morning survived. So I want to lead with this question, and I'm going to do it from a sports perspective, but it also applies to entertainment. And we all know that sports and entertainment are a magnification of life itself. Most people fear failure more than they are excited about succeeding. And so we go into this moment with a negative. I often tell people when people want to train with me is that the bare minimum you have to come to the table with is greatness. I'm not here to make you great. I'm here to help accelerate your journey to greatness because you're already great when you started. So I've always been one that never feared losing. I always focused on winning, always. And the few times I did fear, well, what's going to happen if I lose? I tanked. So just looking at life from a positive perspective, how would you guys address people who, especially our young people, who there's so many standards set that they're almost paralyzed by the trauma of losing, the fear of losing, even before they start? Am I going to make enough grades? Am I going to have friends? Do people like me? Am I looking pretty enough? It's all coming from a place of negativity. So, what would you guys advise them on that? And I'll just leave the panel open.
I'll start. You know, we my I moved to a new state almost 2 years now, and we had just gotten divorced. So I had a my daughter was going to start high school, so she's leaving middle school. She's moving to a new state. Her parents are divorced. We've sold the family home. It goes on and on and on and on. And I had to I have a daughter and a son, and my son is 23 in grad school, but it wasn't easy for him to go through this either. So what I said to my daughter and my son, but my daughter, because she was making that transition to so many different units, I said, listen, all you have to do is just show up. And what I'm going to do is you look at the calendar, or you wake up one morning and you say to yourself, I need a mental health day. And we take it. You take it and I take it. And so her freshman year, last year, we had 4 to 5 mental health days. There may have been a test, there may have been whatever, but guess what? When she woke up and said she couldn't, sitting by yourself for lunch, like it's all these new things. And you know how high school is. It's the same as when you went to high school. So the mental health day, what that did was, it was her support system. It allowed her to be able to show up authentically in her body. And then also mirror that with therapy, because that was a lot of transition. If I was transitioning, I knew she had to be. And so we grew on this journey of mental health days to sophomore year. I said, how many mental health days we taken this year? We've taken 2. And one was because we were traveling. So how I see for our young people is, I said to her, I don't really care about, no one's going to ask you what you got this grade. I'm glad you're an AP or whatever. I said, but I don't want you to get fixated on just the grades. I want you to be a whole person. Because somewhere along the way, that whole person, we forgot to tell our kids, you got to be whole. You got to love yourself. It was just like, everything is a box checker. So I had to give grace to her. I had to give grace and say, whatever you need, your dad and I are going to support you. We're going to parent differently, but co-parent together. But also know that it's communication. Give kids, at least I gave my children a space. Just be. No pressure. My daughter always got high grades. That transition, it was like 70s and 80s. And, and she was like, and I was like, good for you. Like, I applauded that because I knew, why not? So I guess my long about way is saying, for young people, I think we have to I think social media already has their attention. What I would offer is, we have to allow them to show us what they need. And that's a vision looking, but that's also listening. Because when you listen and you watch, you get to understand how to parent.
Absolutely. And I think it's important also, when we talk about listening, panel, that means you are not thinking while they're talking. You're really engaged in listening, because a lot of times we're waiting for somebody to shut up so we can speak up. And we already have an idea of what message we want to give, as opposed to listening to what they need. So I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the panel here.
I'll just, take a slightly different take and talk to, the young folks. I love and amplify what you talked about with the parents and how we can show up. For young folks, the first thing that I would say, and regardless of how you define young, so let me offer that caveat, because I have coaching clients who are in their 3rd act, who are still struggling with some of the same concerns. The first thing I would say is, the rule book is yours to make. You know, we've been taught and told, you've got to do this. You've got to do that. You know, I had so many people, and this is all due respect to those who have terminal degrees. It just was not in the cards for me. But do you know how many people told me I needed one to do things that I had already done that they didn't even know about?
Mhm.
So the rule book is yours to make the plays. You know, I know that if you're using the sport, thinking about sports and using that analogy, that there are certain things like you can't change the end zone. Yes, there are certain things that are set, but how you're going to bring your own unique approach to your journey, that's for you. And your life will bend to whatever rule book you choose,
Mm,
you know? And so if you choose to think outside the box, to follow your intuition, to take some risk and know that you're going to be okay, you're going to create that. And over time, as you have different experiences and highs and lows, life is going to reinforce that you can trust yourself with your playbook.
Yeah.
The
mm,
second thing I would say is check your role models, because some of us have role models that we love, but we ought not be following their rule book. Like the things that they're telling us we've got to do and we've got to become, they ain't doing it. It ain't working for them. You know, and it's like, I love you, but maybe not. And I think it's, and, you know, especially as we come into our own and we're really trying to chart our own course, finding people who have not just achieved whatever pinnacle that you're seeking, but that when you look at their journey and their process, that the how they engaged it,
mm,
how they navigated that path, for me, is more important than where they got. And so I think that that's something important. And then the last thing I would say is that, and I see this in my kids, is that there is something beautifully unique about each of us. These talents that are so specific and nuanced, that are, you know, like our fingerprints. Figure out what that is for you. You know, if there are people in your life who are always saying you're good at this, or we can count on you for that, you know, if there's someone that you can trust, listen. Like Miss Bev was saying, listen, not to respond to say, oh no, that's not me. Listen and really take it in, because maybe there's some information around you that you could grab hold of to figure out your purpose and to start to walk in your path if you would listen to those who love you. You know, I'll be the first person to say that I got to where I am first by riding on the coattails of folks who prayed and thought more of me than I did of myself. But I believed in them. And, you know, and that was true for me. I had mentors who saw things in me, and I was like, me? Okay, well, I trust you, so I'm going to go with this. And then my reality or my perception of myself caught up with theirs.
mm.
Yeah.
You
And
just got
that's kind of like what a coach does. A coach sometimes believes more in their athletes than at the time you believe in yourself. If you know your coach, or you know your mentor, or you know your leader is one, like Tanya, I'm sorry, I love your leader, the
Me too.
commish.
She's on here
When
tonight.
you when you have great people who are leading you, it becomes easy to become part of the team. Notice I didn't say follow. Because one of the things that you can never do is you can never chart your pathway based upon somebody else's journey, because the times were different, you're different, and they are different than what they used to be. But we're always saying, well, when I was young, I don't say that because I can't remember that far back, but Tanya, Tanya, I've called you that for so long
It's
that's
okay.
not in
That's
my
okay.
head.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, Tanya. I'm going to turn it over to you because you deal with young people, and as a commissioner, and you're in that space and you're on this journey. What would your advice be?
Yeah. So, I have been an athlete since I was the ripe age of 5. I've played in it. I've worked in it as an athletics administrator. And so for me, there's winning that takes place outside of the wins and losses, you know?
Say that
Um,
again.
yeah. There's winning that takes place outside of the wins and the losses. And so for our young people, it's really to determine what that means for them. And it's about fit, where they decide to go off to college. Is it a college or university that will fit them? And is it somewhere that they will fit? It is important to their overall health and wellness. What is your role? And I take this from a team perspective. What is your role within that team, within that university? It may not be what best friend Becky is doing. It may not be what your cousin Jim is doing at his school, but what is your role in the place where you are? And how can you best show up as your best self in that place? So, there are opportunities, so many opportunities just to find those successes. And what kind of environment am I in? Is it a healthy environment? Am I with a good coach, mentor, instructor? Are those people that are truly role models for me that I can follow, that I can heed advice from, that I can trust? Are there people that I can trust? What are those? What's my experience like? Can I look back and want to play it forward at that institution once I leave? That's big for young people today, because oftentimes there's so many things that have taken place. And I'm speaking from a collegiate standpoint, really. There's so many things and traumas that have taken place, either from a team, from a coach, from a student athlete, a fellow athlete or instructor. So when I graduate, instead of playing it forward to make it better for those who come behind me, I don't do anything because I'm angry, I'm hurt, and I haven't dealt with that trauma that I experienced. So, it's about really recognizing the opportunities to celebrate in the present while they're there. Outside of if we won a game, if I pass the test, if I have the credit hours necessary to take me from a junior to a senior, where are those successes? And sometimes difficult, but if we really look, there are so many successes that we can fall back on and hold on to bring forward.
I think, Tanya, that leads me into this space that too often we judge our success by comparison, for one, and that's not competitive. Being competitive against somebody else and comparing yourself to somebody else is totally different. You can't be in someone else's space. So I listen to you guys, and we don't celebrate the small things that we accomplished. And so we're constantly, and I think that goes back to what everybody talked about in being present. I passed the class. The best class I took, the most proud I am of myself, is there was an English lit professor, and I considered myself a good writer. All the athletes dropped out. I was the only Black student in the class to begin with at Auburn, but everybody dropped out. I refused to drop out. I did A-level work and made a C- and was happy. That's the best class I ever took. So, Doc, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So our young people, I have a campus of 30,000 students. We're responsible for 30,000 lives. And our students are coming in distressed, more distressed than we've ever seen, without coping skills, right? So this social comparison thing, Instagrams and all that, we are battling that nonstop on our campuses. And our student athletes aren't remiss. I mean, in fact, it's probably even worse for them, because all the fans, the critics, the coaches that sit on the sidelines are telling our athletes how they're doing in real time, and they're going and seeing this over and over again, and it's abusive in some ways to their spirit. And so for me, it's helping them to center on what we've been talking about. Who are they? What defines their success? Who are they as individuals? And that might be different than the person sitting next to them. And so there's this, I'm always in this woo-woo world. I love the 4 agreements, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 4 agreements help you figure out where you sit, right? Be impeccable with your word. That just means do what you say you're going to do. And if you can't do it, say that, right? Don't take anything personal. So when folks are coming at you, it's really more about them than it is about you anyway. It's how they do life, right? Don't make any assumptions. That means ask questions. Figure out what's happening. Don't assume anything. And always do your best. And your best is today. So my best today, like I'm feeling bad. I have a head cold. I can't hear. My throat's scratchy. My best is just showing up. I don't have my eyelashes on. My face is not beat, as my daughter would say. But this is the best I can do today, right? And I'm okay with how I show up because I know this is my best, right? So that internal dialogue is really what the 4 agreements is about. And if we can get our students, our student athletes, our young people to understand what their entire internal dialogue is, then the external chatter doesn't matter as much. And they can enjoy that English class where they get a C, right?
Mhm.
Because that was the best that they could do. And it wasn't personal, right? The teacher didn't hate them. It's just, it was hard
No,
it's
it
hard
wasn't
material.
personal.
Right. So those 4 agreements, it's just what I live by. I teach my athletes this when I get to work with them. I teach my coaches this, more importantly, so that when they are actually working with our student athletes, that they are as healthy as humanly possible as well.
We talked, I can't remember who mentioned this, but I'm going to dive into it so hard right now, which is we don't give grace. We don't give grace to others. They may be having a bad day. And we don't give grace to ourselves when we make a mistake. My granddaughter made a mistake. And I told her, it's not the end of the world. You're going to be okay. And she said, Grammy, I think I just need to cry. And I said, okay, I'll sit here with you. And she bawled. When I tell you, it was over a grade, bawled. And she said, the teacher said, don't email her. I said, email her anyway and turn in the work. At least whether you get a grade or not, you'll know that you did the work. And it worked out really well. But her being aware of herself to say, I just needed to cry, that's giving yourself grace. So I want to talk about the need that it's not personal. Sometimes people are going through things, and right now we've got so much negative energy swirling throughout the universe and in America in particular, but across the world, because I'm in America, so I can feel it a little bit deeper. How do we begin to move through this space? Because giving grace is from a place of love, and to be at peace, we have to host love. So I'm going to turn that question back to the panel.
One thing I will say is that as much as we do give people grace, we still have to have healthy boundaries, right? So I have to know when what you're doing to me is harmful to me, and what you're doing to me is just you being not a great person or not having a great behavior in that moment, right? So learning who I am and how to express that to you is where the boundary starts. And then how you respond to that is where the boundary is going to continue or end, right? And so making sure that, yes, we give folks grace. Yes, we don't take what they do personal, because what they do to us is what they do to everyone, but it doesn't mean it's okay, right?
Doesn't
So
mean
I'm
it's
not taking
okay.
your
Absolutely not.
I'm not taking your behavior personal,
Stop
but it's
cussing
not
me out for no
okay.
reason. It's not okay.
Exactly. So I just want to make sure that I didn't lead people the wrong way when I said don't take things personally. You still have to have a boundary that says what you did to me is not okay.
It's not okay. Absolutely. And a lot of leaders right now are not very embracing. They're somewhat abusive because it becomes all about you. So I love the ideology of adding in that. Giving grace means not holding on to the negativity where it damages you, but going through the experiences, setting those boundaries, and then moving away from it. That's giving grace. And that giving grace to others keeps you from stockpiling a lot of hurt.
Mm.
But I do love the fact that you added in, but that does not mean don't set boundaries on that behavior. So I'll turn it back to the panel.
I think two things come to mind for me. I think the first is it's hard to give grace when you don't have peace with yourself. And
Oh,
so I
preach.
think it really begins with our own selves, right? So as the old adage goes, hurting people hurt people. That is so true and so real. And so before I can extend grace, I have to be okay with self. The second thing that comes to mind takes me back to a recent staff meeting we had, and one of our junior employers said, "Don't make assumptions that because my door is closed, that something is wrong." And it goes back to those intergenerational gaps where in my more mature, seasoned self, I assume you're shutting us off. You're closing the door. But for the Generation Y, Generation Zer, it's I just want my own space. I'm fine. So where we were going around, open your door, open your door, open your door, turn on the lights, take your headphones out. That's how this generation operates and navigates. And it's okay. So coming to terms with our differences and meeting somewhere in the middle to pull the best out of both sides.
Mm. And I think the key to that, Tanya, is communication.
Sure.
Be open and receptive to speaking your truth, but in hearing someone else's truth.
Yeah. I would say grace is also for me, transparency. Being able to show up authentically, right? Because then you're able to afford others grace, but then they could also afford it to you. And it's the reciprocity. So I know for me, when I'm doing a presentation and if I have coffee that day and I know I'm gonna sweat and couple that with me having a hot flash, I'm gonna need some grace. So I will spray, I will spritz, but I will always have a disclaimer. But it's just being transparent and saying, you know what, I know we don't talk about that, but this is real. This is what's happening. So afford me that. Or if it's you have to pick up your child, I need grace because I think also grace is what the intel that you have. It's the intel that you have for yourself. It's the intel you have on other people. So how you deposit and how people deposit from you, or is it withdrawal always, right? It's that personal grace that you need to afford our leaders or political grace or whatever, but it's also how are you depositing to other people?
Mm.
And are other people just take, 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 take? That's not grace either. So it's doing that intel with yourself and saying, okay, am I the only one giving here? Or am I giving and receiving and vice versa?
Mm.
So grace is definitely a two-way street. You can't always give and not. You have permission with grace to say, this relationship is not loving and kind. I need grace.
Mm.
Karen, I love that you lifted up the deposits and withdrawals because I was thinking about in my work, and I do a lot of work with teams around culture and what might be sort of impeding folks from doing the good work that they came there to do. And oftentimes this idea of grace comes up. And it comes up often with that power dynamic that's associated with the withdrawals and deposits, that I am in a position of power, therefore I expect grace because I said so. Or maybe I didn't say so, but there's this implied,
Right.
and it creates a dynamic where I'm always, as you described, withdrawing. It's one of the reasons why I tell people that I know that I am deserving of grace, but I never want to borrow too much. I want to be aware of
Mm.
the cumulative impact of the grace that I've received. Not because I don't deserve it, but in my humanity, I might forget the impact. And impact matters. And oftentimes we focus so much on our intentions. I meant to, I was going to, and it's true, but our impact matters. And sometimes when people have difficulty extending us grace or extending us more grace, it's because, you know, we always asking for it, and maybe there's not a balance there. Um, the other thing that I wanted to share that came to mind was I think it's important for us to all sit with our relationship to grace, because what I've observed in myself and other people, but I'll frame it around me, is that my ability to extend grace has increased as I've been able to extend grace to myself. So it's easier to extend it to others because I've learned to extend it to me. I have clients and folks in my life who are really critical of themselves, and then it's so much easier to project it onto them, to other people. But when I notice myself or them starting to make a judgment and say, no, wait a minute, I know what it's like to have a tough day. I don't like what was said. I don't like what was done, but I can start first with empathy. But if we can't empathize with ourselves and be present, it's really difficult for us to make those connections that allow us to extend grace authentically versus the bless your heart. And then I pick up the phone and I call Dr. Mari and say, she did it again, because that's not grace. That's cover, you know? And then we tell someone else, like it gets messy, whether it's in friend groups or in teams. So I think that being aware of our relationship with grace and like what might be preventing us from actually giving it, and what might we learn from just looking at that more closely. And then, again, just being aware of how our own power might impact how we think about grace, our power over people, whether it's our kids. There's articles and memes that talk about how Black folks in particular don't apologize to their kids. Because do I deserve grace? Do I need to even say I'm sorry to even invite the grace in?
I'll give you
And
one better, which is my parents didn't say I'm sorry, so I don't have to say I'm sorry. No, that
justifying a lack
hurt.
of humility. Right,
That
right.
hurt. Dr. Mari, would you like to end this component, and then we're going to close it out with everybody giving their final word?
Oh, wow. Again, this panel has been extraordinary, and a right relationship begins with self, right? That's what we're talking about, is that you can't have a right relationship with anyone else if you don't have one with yourself. And so I just encourage everyone to get therapy, because that is when you get to actually see and hear yourself. There's nothing in therapy that I do that's magical. I don't have any answers. I am just a good listener, and I'm able to mirror back and parrot back what you've just said that you haven't heard yourself say ever.
All too often, we walk through this journey as either victimizers or victims. And both are held hostage in those positions. There's no productivity and no joy, no peace, no real purpose in victimizing or being a victim. And I think one of you said it, which is at some point, instead of addressing it as it's happening, we talk about it to other people and think that fixed it. But if you ever listen to yourself, you're going to repeat that story over and over and over, because you're trapped into the emotions of how it made you feel. But you haven't checked to see if you were not feeling well when the conversation or when you went out there in the first place. Because I'm going to finish this up with, we are all energy. And our energy attracts to us what energy we bring into the room. So I'm going to leave it open for you guys to pour into our audience just any words of wisdom. But before I do that, can I ask one question? Shayla, you had one of the most phenomenal mentors at Wake Forest. What's the one thing you learned from, and I'm going to let you announce the mentor. What was one of the things that you would pass on from this great human being to our audience? And I'll let you tell who it is. Shayla kind of froze for a minute. There she goes. There we go.
As I was thinking, oh, wow, that's hard to just think of just one. So Dr. Barbie Myers Oaks was my mentor at Wake and continues to be a close friend and mentor to this day. The first thing that came to mind for me, which helped me set some boundaries in the workplace, was to treat my job like a contract and not a marriage. And when she framed it, oftentimes we're burning the midnight oil. We're planning our life around our 9 to 5 or whatever your work hours are. It is the center of who we are and how we define ourselves. What am I if I am not doing this work? But on the other side, if I'm thinking about it as a contract, I know that it is for a limited time only, and I have the wherewithal to decide when it will and if it will continue and under what conditions. And so that's something that, she said to me, one of many things she said to me that has always helped me to think about boundaries. And when I'm holding on to something that is dead, searching for the living amongst the dead, if you will, because I'm treating it, I've assigned a different status to the relationship than it actually is. It taught me to define relationships with clarity and not my ego or my need to please people or anything else versus what is right for me and should this continue, and if so, under what conditions.
Absolutely. Ladies, can I ask each of you to give a piece of advice you've learned from someone that's touched your heart? Does anybody have something?
I do. As I've entered this new life, I guess, and really working on my healing, it's difficult. And it's been my sister who is my constant, who has said to me, it may not always be pretty, but it will always be beautiful. And I just keep that in perspective, that it may not be pretty coming out of therapy. 2-3 days later, it may not be pretty, but the release is such a beautiful experience. And I take that with me when I go to therapy, through this conversation, and through my healing journey.
Powerful.
I would say,
thank you.
That's amazing. I would say you have permission to show up just how you are. Just how you are. You have permission. You also have permission to have joy, to receive joy, but you also have permission to be naked, right? We never talk about what that looks like, but I feel what I had to learn, and I'll pass this on, is I had to be naked so that I could retrain that mindset that was holding on to stuff that was seeping into the cells and joints and tissues and ligaments. Once you start to pay attention to the messages that you keep on telling yourself over and over, whether they're good or we're not judging, but whatever those messages are, once you really listen to the conversation that you're having with yourself and how that impacts you, you start to reframe the conversation. You start to be kinder to yourself. You start to stop judging yourself. And you realize you only can do the best with the information you have in front of you on this journey. So why not start to retrain so that you can have better conversations with yourself?
Dr. Mari.
So I've had so many people pour into my life. I don't know if I can pick just one. But one of my favorite books of all times, I read it at least twice a year, is called The Alchemist, right? And so The
I love
Alchemist
that
is really
book.
about taking the very next, not 10 steps, the very next best step. And sometimes those steps are scary, and sometimes you know exactly what that step is going to be, but it's just the very next best step. And the journey is so beautiful when you allow yourself to be present in that. So that would be my advice: is just take the next best step in your journey.
The best advice I was given was two things, and it came from the same person. It is a Raymond Coleman told me to always walk in the room and know you're worthy. And one of my mantras is I walk around and I say to myself, sometimes verbally out loud, because I'm old and it's okay if I talk to myself out loud. I say, I'm worthy. I'm worthy to be in this space. I'm worthy to be in this moment. And that allows me to own my moment. And the other thing he says, and Shayla already knows what I'm about to say, F it.
Yes, that's my
Sometimes we
favorite.
take too serious and it's not that important. Things that we complain about today, a week from now, it won't even be important. It's a waste of stress. So we're gonna close it out. And before I close it out, I want to mention a step up program. I'm going to be presenting. Felicia Allen Hall does a phenomenal job on the symposium in Charlotte. So I'm going to be in North Carolina and see some of these beautiful women while I'm there. So please support and go to a Step Up symposium. Also, I know that Tanya had an event that's coming up. Tanya, can you tell us about that event?
Yes, the event is on May 13th, the Saturday before Mother's Day. It's called A Beautiful You. I don't know if you have the link, but I can surely post it, but it's a Mother's Day celebration. I am one of the speakers and was asked just to share my testimony and another opportunity to take the next best step in my healing. And very excited about it. And I challenge you to look into it, to bring your mothers, bring your daughters, and to just celebrate us and who we are.
And where would that be at?
It's in Durham, North Carolina. So I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So with that being said, I'm going to allow our panel to close us out. Briefly, just give us your final words of wisdom. And thank you guys for just being so phenomenal. Anybody want to go? Anybody has anything else to add in before we head out?
I would just, first of all, Ms. Bev, thank you for creating this space and thank you to each of the panelists for pouring into me. I needed to hear the things that you shared and to be reminded. And for all of us, I would just, remind us that we've always been enough. You've always been enough. Every iteration of you has been enough. You are right where you're supposed to be. And I just bid you peace and blessings.
And where can we get the OMG products? Candles, the scents
Yes.
are phenomenal. We got your program up.
Sure. So you can find us at omgwellnessbar.com. OMG stands for Oh My Goodness. You can go to our website, follow us on social media at OMG Wellness Bar. We're located in Winston-Salem. We offer not only natural products, but services, including Reiki, massage therapy, and coaching. Follow us and learn about our upcoming events, and we would love to service you and your family if you are in the Triad area or if you want to travel here from wherever you are.
Heidi?
I would like to read from Power Thoughts, and it's a quick one. I just want to leave this with everyone from Louise Hay. And it basically says, I ask for what I want. I know that whatever I need, will always be there for me. The universe is so kind and it's so on time. Coach Bev, thank you for the opportunity to be with these amazing sisters and yourself. And yeah, folks, just go out there and just rock out. Rock out on your terms.
Coach Bev, thank you so much for the opportunity. You just don't know how much these women have poured into me today. And I would just challenge everyone to just realize that your journey is your journey. Don't compare it to anyone else's. It won't look the same. It won't feel the same. It won't be within the same timeline. But keep the main thing the main thing. Focus on self. Take it one day at a time. And the healing, the beauty is all on the other side.
Mm.
I'll just leave y'all with 5 minutes. Just give yourself 5 minutes a day just to be with yourself, to hear yourself, to figure out what's going on with you. Just 5 minutes. Set a timer, morning, night, in the afternoon, doesn't matter. Just 5 minutes.
And I want to tell everyone how just phenomenal each of you are and how strong you are to be in a space that you're willing to share the authenticity of your journey, and just understand that falling down, not failing, it's called falling down, is part of the process of learning and accessing your greatness, because we gain so much more through the challenges we've overcome that we don't give ourselves honor, that we're still here in this space moving forward. And every day ain't gonna be your best day, but you can make it a great day by the things that you say to yourself, thought, word, and deed. Stay in harmony with your purpose, your thoughts, what you do, what you say, what you hear controls your energy. If you listen to your friends and the conversations that you're having around you, it will tell you where you are. So with that being said, don't forget a step up. Don't forget the Mother's Day. Support OMG. And please, Karen Taylor Vass, yoga expert, don't be afraid to challenge yourself to step outside the box. Thank you guys so much. I hope everybody has benefited from this as much as I have. Thank you for blessing us with your journey.
Thank you.